Ladies and gentlemen, we now move to our second session, Strengthening Wellbeing and Inclusivity.
Baiklah hadirin sekalian, sebelum itu majlis mengalu-alukan dan merakamkan ucapan ribuan terima kasih kepada Yang Berhormat Menteri Rafizi Ramli yang telah bersudi bersama-sama dengan kita pada hari ini.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now move to our second session, Strengthening Wellbeing and Inclusivity. Strengthening well-being and inclusivity is essential to ensure a better life for all Malaysians. This session will focus on inclusivity and reducing inequality, special development, aging nation, and the cost of living.
To moderate this session, we would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Professor Dato Dr. Madeline Berma, Fellow of Akademi Sains Malaysia, and the panelists Yang Berusaha Dr. Matthew Wai-Poi, Lead Economist for the Poverty and Equity Global Practice World Bank. Yang Berbahagia Emeritus Professor Dato Norma Mansor, Director of Social Wellbeing Research Centre, Universiti Malaya, and Puan Nik Nur Ainun Nik Osman, Deputy Director of Social Wellbeing Research Centre, Universiti Malaya, to come upon the stage to start our second session. And ladies and gentlemen, without any delay, we pass the stage to Yang Berbahagia Professor Dato Dr. Madeline Berma to moderate the session.
Thank you very much, Chair. Oh, we have two there. Thank you very much. Nama saya Madeline Berma. So, selamat datang ke sesi kedua. Today we're going to have a very interesting topic. It's called Strengthening Well-being and Inclusivity. So I think we have been given a very interesting, a good start this morning. We listened to, it's a bit pessimistic, you know, when I hear all the, and we are talking about taxes, we are talking about the slowing down of the economy. So as I was sitting there, I was saying, oh my goodness, what a way to start my seminar today. Okay, but we have four able speakers here, very, very, in their own way, because most of them, we have two academics here. Okay, and I think one will be coming later. He's on his way after briefing his minister. You know, things are a bit difficult now. So, okay, so allow me to kind of share a bit what this session is all about. So the topic is all about strengthening well-being and inclusivity. We've been discussing about poverty, we have been discussing well-being, inclusivity in the context of the general discussion. But today what we're going to listen to is, we have two academics and we have someone from the World Bank, you know, who's going to share with us experiences from the World Bank, also from countries, how they have come about in terms of strengthening well-being. And there's even a section on aging population. Oh, that includes me. I'm very happy to listen to that. And I think many of us here will be looking forward to that discussion by Prof. Norma. What else can we hear more, Prof? And I think, as we were discussing just now, there were mention about taxation. Oh my goodness. You know, is this really a good time to talk about taxes? Painful, yes. And we heard also early this morning about how is it really necessary for us to change the way we handle our economy. Yes, things are tough. So it is really a very interesting session. Okay, allow me to introduce briefly. So let us welcome, please give a big hand to our three speakers here. We have here Dr. Matthew Wai-Poi, okay. He is the lead economist, oh, I love this, lead economist for the Poverty and Equity Global Practice World Bank. And our second speaker will be Prof. Emerita, Prof. Dato Dr. Norma Mansor. Consider her my sifu. She's from University Malaya. And she's going to talk about aged nation by 2044. Ooh, 2044. Now, how old are we going to be? Please start calculating. What do we need to do? So I think we better prepare ourselves. And the third speaker will be Cost and Standard of Living, Belanjawanku, Reference Budget for Malaysia by Puan Nik Noor Ainon. She's also from University Malaya, another academic, who will be sharing some of your research work. And we will be joined later by our, I think Dr. Alias Rameli, he is on his way. So he will be discussing 4th National Physical Plan for a prosperous, I like that, prosperous, resilient and livable Malaysia. So let us all welcome these 4 speakers, or the 3 speakers. Please give it a big round of applause. Eh? Okay, now I would like to invite Matthew, if you can share with us your thoughts on inclusivity and reducing inequalities. I'm very strict, it's 15 minutes. Or else, all right, okay, he said he's from the World Bank. Thank you, Matthew. All right. Or else I will sumpit him.
I was saying I'm from the World Bank. I'll make sure I go much longer than the 15 minutes. So good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to talk about inequality. And the points we want to make today are really about how lower inequality, addressing inequality, is going to be key to meeting the aspirations of both the people of Malaysia and the country's aspiration to be a high-income country. So I'm just going to quickly discuss that today. If I can get technology to work for me.
It's not working?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. Oh, good. That's right. GovTech. So, first of all, why do we care about inequality? Actually, some inequality is good. Being able to get ahead, being able to have greater return means you stay in school and you study hard. It means you work hard at your job or starting your business. You invest in your business. You invest in other people, and you can innovate and take risks because you get reward for that. So actually, some inequality is good, but not all inequality is good. And particularly, we worry about inequality of opportunity. So things that are outside of your control, where you're born, your gender. If your parents were rich or well-educated or not, if your opportunities in life and your outcomes in life are going to depend on those circumstances outside of your control, that's when we worry about inequality. And we worry about the degree of mobility that you have over your lifetime or, over generations, over your children's lifetime. Because if there isn't mobility, if working hard, staying in school doesn't allow you to move up in life, then why bother? And so that's why we do worry to an extent about inequality. So I'm going to raise 3 reasons why we care about lower inequality. The first is equity. So Malaysia, as Dr. Yasuhiko said this morning, Malaysia is nearly high-income country, but not everywhere, not all places and not all people in Malaysia are being brought behind. And so we see here the average income per capita in different states of Malaysia. Kuala Lumpur already twice as high as the level needed on average for the country to be a high-income country. There's a number of other states who are there, but there's many more states who are not yet there and in fact quite far from that level. So it's just a matter of equity. If the country is becoming high-income, then why will not all of its people also be economically secure and prosperous? The second is stability or social cohesion. So here's a question that was asked. It was back in 2014, so it's a little while ago, but actually inequality in 2014 was close to its lowest point that it's ever been. So at about the best time to be asking this question, Malaysians were asking, how big a problem do you think is the gap between rich and poor? In other words, how big a problem is inequality? Well, about half of Malaysians said it's a very big problem, and most of the rest of them said it's a moderately big problem. So you've got 4 out of 5 Malaysians saying actually inequality is a very big or a moderately big problem. The third reason we might want lower inequality is about efficiency or its relationship to economic growth. So a lot of people think that having lower inequality actually means having lower growth, but this is not the case. The growing cross-country evidence is that higher inequality actually might be bad for growth. So higher inequality means that children in poor families may not stay in school, their parents may not invest the same time and resources into them, human capital accumulation in the country will be lower. At the same time, if you've got higher inequality, you can have political and economic instability. When you have that type of instability, people don't want to invest into the country as much, and this can also undermine economic growth. So actually lower inequality can be better for economic growth. And so for these three reasons, for reasons of equity, for reasons of stability, and for reasons of efficiency, lower inequality is actually going to be a really important part of achieving the aspirations for all Malaysians to become middle class, but also therefore for the country to become a high-income country. So what is the picture for inequality in Malaysia? So this is the Gini index. You don't need to know, but it's a very common measure of inequality. It's between 0 and 100. 0 is everyone has the same, it's all equal. 100 is one person has everything, and so obviously countries are in between. And so we see that Malaysia there, if we look at on the left-hand side, it's the group of ASEAN countries. Malaysia has a relatively high level of inequality. The middle group is recently transitioned to high-income status countries, and relative to them, Malaysia's level of inequality is relatively high. On the right-hand side, we have the OECD countries, so the most developed countries. Malaysia's level of inequality would be relatively high for those as well. So the level of income inequality in Malaysia is relatively high. And what has been the pattern? So actually, if we look on the left, again, this is the Gini coefficient. Since 1970, over about 45 years, there was this long period of decline of inequality in Indonesia, in Malaysia. So inequality had been falling. However, starting just before COVID, around about 2016 or so, inequalities had begun to rise. So even before the pandemic, and of course there are reasons to think that COVID has made this situation worse, but will make the future path of inequality worse. Everyone was affected by the pandemic, not just in Malaysia but around the world. Many people were affected in terms of employment, but if we think about employment interruptions, they were greater for women workers. They were greater for younger workers. They were greater for people who had low education or low income. And if we think most importantly about the learning losses, the fact that schools shut down and that kids couldn't learn effectively, we estimate the impact of this was to lose about 1.3 years of schooling. Right, which is a massive loss, and of course has critical implications for Malaysia's transition to high income and its future prosperity. And so not just did all children suffer, poorer children suffered more. Even before COVID, they had lower rates of attendance, and during COVID, they were less able to benefit from online learning. So these learning losses have been bad for everyone, but perhaps worst for those who could least afford it. So, what do we do about it? What are the policies that we might bring to bear? So this means understanding what are the drivers of inequality. And here's a sort of a useful framework for thinking about how does inequality evolve over the life cycle of people. So it starts at birth. It starts with the circumstances that you're born into, the characteristics outside of your control. These can include your gender, your ethnicity, where you're born. Is it in an urban or a rural place? Is it in a rich state or a poor state? And then over time, as you are a young person, what access to health and education opportunities do you have? What human capital, which is going to be core to your future livelihoods, what can you gather? Do you have the same access to schooling? Is the quality of schooling the same for you as it is for someone else? And then as you become an adult, do you get upward economic mobility by getting a good job? And at the same time, we need to worry about risks. We need to worry about shocks. This could be illness or accident could happen to you, or you could lose your job. These can be also shocks that affect whole communities or whole states or the whole country, such as natural disasters, economic shocks. COVID-19 has made it very clear that these shocks can happen. And with climate change, potentially increasing the frequency and the intensity of natural disasters, this will be an issue. So what type of safety net is there so that when a shock happens that you can manage this? So what type of policies can we be turning to look at? The first is better policies for places. And so Here's just an example of how you can think about the differences between different places. It's a bit small, you probably won't read it, but each of these circles, each of these coloured circles represents a different dimension of welfare. We've got here living conditions such as the quality of your housing and electricity and water. We've got health, we've got education, and we've got income. The size of that circle represents how many people or what percentage of people are poor in those areas. So a bigger circle is more poverty. And you see here urban versus rural areas. So there's two things to note here. The circles are smaller in urban areas. So multidimensional poverty is smaller in urban areas than it is in rural areas. The circles are bigger in the rural areas. The other thing to notice is the overlap between those circles. In urban areas, yes, there's some overlap, but largely those circles don't have a big overlap. In rural areas, it's a very large overlap. What does this mean? It means if you're in an urban area, you might be poor on 1, maybe 2 dimensions of welfare, but not on 3 or 4. In a rural area, you're much likely to be deprived on multiple dimensions. And this makes it so much harder for you to get ahead in life. And what it does mean from a policy perspective is we need to tailor our perspectives to different places. It's not going to be the same type of policy in each area. But at the same time, if we look at inequality and what share of inequality comes from differences between groups, between men and women, between different ethnic groups, between different locations, for example, there is quite a bit of inequality that comes because of differences between these groups. There's more inequality that comes from differences within these groups. And so for that reason, we need also to be thinking about better policies for people, not just for places. Here's just an example where we're looking at education. And what we're looking at in this chart, we've divided Malaysians up into 5 groups of 20% each. And so let's just look at the top line and the bottom line. The top line is quintile 5, the richest 20% of Malaysians. We're looking at 19 to 25-year-olds, and we're saying, how long do they stay in school? How much education do they get? And so you see that top line, it actually stays near 100% all the way through high school. So almost all of the richest 20% of Malaysians are staying in high school. And even afterwards, when you go and look at the university level, it's still about 70% until actually it gets to bachelor's. If you look at that bottom line, this is the poorest 20% of Malaysians. And you see, by the end of primary school, there's already 10% have dropped out. If we look towards high school, it drops a lot, and by the time we get to university, it's 10% maybe who are there. So we need policies that are going to address these disparities and opportunities for different people. And let me close by talking about, since I've been invited to talk a little bit about tax and fiscal policy. I do want to emphasize the important role that fiscal policy plays in all of this. We're talking about important investments in human capital, in physical infrastructure, in digital connectivity, and the resilience of our society to climate change. That all costs money. These public investments are vital for Malaysia to become a high-income country. To finance those investments, it's going to have to be done through tax revenues, and as we saw this morning, through higher tax revenues than Malaysia currently enjoys. And that's fine. Those taxes are going to place a burden on households. The question is, how do we combine the taxes and the spending in a way that the people who are more poor and more vulnerable don't have a bigger burden on them? And so, let me just sort of point out some of the lessons that we've got here. What each of these lines are for countries that we have data on is how much is inequality reduced by fiscal policy. So each of these lines is reduction in the Gini index. And the good news is all of them go down. So fiscal policy in all of the countries that we have information from is actually reducing inequality today. We've grouped them into the high-income countries on the left, a lot of upper middle income countries such as Malaysia in the center left, lower middle income countries on the center right, and low income countries on the right. First thing to notice is all of these lines go down. So fiscal policy is reducing inequality in all countries. The second thing to notice is that as you get richer, you've got more ability. The lines come down further on average, right? You're raising more revenues, therefore you have more fiscal space to spend on all of these pro-poor policies that we're talking about. But the third thing to notice is there's large variation even within income groups. So even as we look at the upper middle income countries, there's many upper middle income countries whose pattern of taxes and spending does less to reduce inequality than it does in many lower middle income countries. And so there are lessons here as we look forward to the midterm review of the 12th Malaysia Plan to say, what can we learn from other middle income countries about how we raise more taxes and how we use the fiscal space there to invest in a way in these public investments such that the country will transition to high income countries, but that we'll be increasing the opportunities for the many people, and that all Malaysians can transition into the middle class. And so these are the reasons why I think inequality is of prime importance as we go into the review. So thank you.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you very much, Matthew. That was really good, and a very interesting way to close your presentation by discussing taxes. So we're looking forward to more questions rather than answers to this big question. Should we increase our tax in Malaysia? And how can we do that? Okay, for our next presenter, I would like to invite Prof. Emeritus, Professor Emeritus, Dato Dr. Norma Mansor. She'll be discussing this aged nation by 2044, what we need to do. The floor is yours, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Madeline. Yeah, am I working this all right?
Yeah.
Is that working? Yes? No, it's not moving. The green one. Oh, sorry, that's a pointer. Okay, right. Yeah, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. My job is a lot easier because I think some of the things, especially the earlier part of my discussion, was covered by the previous speakers, including the first panel. Yeah. So, but talking about the aged population, I will cover the following areas. Yeah, we start with the macroeconomic performance, where Malaysia was doing pretty well. Yeah, doing quite well by any standard. But our issue here is with and poverty. We managed to reduce poverty to less than 1%. If we were to use the old indicator, but if we were to use the new measure for poverty, we will have still have pockets of hardcore poverty, and we are managing our current GDP growth has picked up, especially in the last quarter. We are doing well, better than expected, and also the inflation rate, we're able to, the inflation rate starts to come down as well, starts to be manageable. But our issue here is that a certain percentage of our population is still poor, and also, as Matt mentioned, that the relative poverty is still our problem. Our issue is also with the aging population. Yeah, while the country is about to recover and face many challenges, both external and internal, we also have our structural issues that we have not resolved since the 90s. Yeah, after 1997, post the Asian financial crisis, we were not able to resolve our structural issues in the economy. But we're faced with another issue that is coming quite rapidly, or rather very rapidly, to Malaysia as well, which is the population pyramid that's changing. Yeah, when the pyramid is nice and beautiful, when the apex is small, that shows that the aged is small. Yeah, but as the middle part grows wider, it shows that. And the birth rate is getting smaller. It indicates that the lower birth rate here, yeah, the lower birth rate, as you can see in 2010 and 2040, yeah, that we're seeing the decrease in the fertility among Malaysians. So we measure fertility per woman, yeah. So you can see the decrease. And showed here in this graph that for every 10 employed people, the total dependency of old age is 1. Yeah, 1% is the responsibility of 10, but the total dependency will increase to 3% in 2050. So that shows how we have to carry the responsibility of those who are aging as well as the young. Yeah? But in the case of Malaysia, when you talk about aging population, then you are caring and producing for those who are not in the productive in the economy. And this is due to the longer life expectancy, where life expectancy at birth is 73.4 years on average, but for male is 71.3% and female 75.8%. Whereas at the age of 65, you get male at 79% and female 81%. And as you can see, the division of young-old, that's how we describe for the years 60 to 69, as you can see there in 2010. For middle-old, 70 to 79, the blue graph, the light blue graph, and the dark blue graph is the old, which is 80 and older. As you can see that the old start to rise, yeah, as we proceed to 2030. What are the issues and challenges in preparing for aged population? As Matt mentioned, and others as well, we've had this workshop yesterday coordinated by the World Bank, also talking about inequality and poverty, and especially among older adults. Our data shows that there are low savings and lack of steady income among older persons, and that will be problematic, especially when preparing for old age. So older persons become poor after retirement, yeah? And productivity also for the nation, it will be affected by the aging population, where the working age population have to support more aging population, and that would also affect our savings for investment, because when there are less people contributing to the economy and contributing to the social insurance, such as the EPF and also the civil service pension, then there will be less savings which will contribute or turn into investments. And three, lacking in social protection among Malaysians. There is a huge gap, as I'll show you, yeah, in social assistance or social insurance coverage, especially the mandatory contributory coverage, where persons who are self-employed and with unstable income are not covered by any kind of social insurance, and also the fiscal sustainability, and Matt has also, and also Firdaus this morning has alluded to the issue with fiscal sustainability. And inequality and poverty, if I can explain some of those points that I've raised earlier. The low savings would indicate that, especially with the withdrawals of the EPF, yeah, the 3 withdrawals that we've had, would further reduce the income for Malaysians to prepare for old age, and they probably have to work until for as long as they can. And the incidence of absolute poverty among the head of households, this is shown by DOSM data, yeah, that for those aged 65 and older increased from 10.9% in 2016 to 12% in 2016. And I think these numbers and figures have been featured and discussed, yeah, where 56% of EPF contributors aged 54 years have savings less than 50,000. Yeah, that was after the withdrawals were allowed. And if they live for another 20 years, because they retire at 60, then they would have 200 ringgit a month for the next 20 years. That is, if they live until 80. But for some, when they live older or they live longer than 80, then their savings will be exhausted by then. Yeah. The productivity, as I mentioned, that will be affected by the aging population, because the older persons will not necessarily be in the productive economy compared to the employed persons, and this will further reduce the productivity and the national productivity, and the dependency ratio, as I mentioned earlier. It will increase from 48% to 49.5%. in 2040, and that would also pose a challenge, yeah, to the working age population, where you will have to support a bigger older population in years to come. And older adults also face challenges due to limited employment opportunities. So chances of them to be able to participate in the society and to become financially independent is also a challenge. Yeah. So the graph here shows the total number of dependents, shown by the bold blue line, and the total dependency, the red line, the red graph. The bold line shows the old age dependency ratio, and the child dependency ratio is the dotted line. As you can see that it crosses, the bold blue line and the dotted lines crosses in years 2045 or so. Yeah, so that means we will have older people than the younger people. Yeah. So the challenge is the lacking in social protection coverage among the Malaysians, especially among the workforce. Yeah. I have on the right side, the graph that shows that the social protection coverage in Malaysia is of the two poles. Yeah. On the right-hand side, you will have the vulnerable groups such as bantuan orang miskin and a few other support. Yeah. For the real poor. And on the right is the formal sector coverage, where you will have the likes of the EPF, SOCSO, the Co-op, and LTAT. Yeah? So in the middle are those who are not covered. So the Malaysian population now is about 32 or 33 million, and about 23 million are in the working age, yeah, from the age of 15 to 60, and out of that, 55% are not covered. Yeah? So our coverage, the social assistance or social insurance, are more accurate. That is does not cover at least 55% of the Malaysian workforce. And 30%, the data also shows that 30% households do not receive any family allowance. These are the family allowance for the poor and also B40, yeah? Especially, we had the Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia. After the Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia or Prihatin, yeah, more people from our data shows that because we have a nationally representative data, the Malaysian Aging and Retirement Survey, which shows that the first social assistance that we had for B40, yeah, which was Bantuan Satu Malaysia, there were less people covered, but post-COVID with Bantuan Keluarga and Bantuan Prihatin, more people were covered. But still, our issue is the middle or the missing middle. And this missing middle also includes those who are in the formal sector, but they are not, they are contract workers where they don't contribute to the EPF or contract work. Yeah? But majority or a big percentage of them are also women, because women tend to either they don't join the workforce at all, or if they do, midway at the age of 30 or so, they will drop out of the workforce. So that would account for the 55% that we have for uncovered. Yeah. So fiscal sustainability, because I'm watching the clock, I only have about two minutes to go. Fiscal sustainability was covered by Matt earlier. Yeah, that shows that our revenue is very low, and if we look at the how we collect our revenue, it shows that our taxation system, yeah, that is the direct taxes, yeah, is about corporate and income tax is about 39%. So it is a big percentage comes from direct taxes, and also therefore our revenue that we use to support social spending and other types of spending come from the petroleum as well, yeah, and that's not sustainable. Yeah? So we ought to look at the more progressive and efficient type of taxation. What I want to propose is, in order for us to prepare for the aging population, is to shift our thinking from the charity social protection. We always see social protection or social assistance as a welfare, yeah, welfare assistance, but social protection is more than that. Social protection is a strategy for development. And as Matt discussed with us this morning, and also in the yesterday at the workshop, that how the redistributive side of the social protection would enable not just for those who are poor to not to fall further into the poverty group, and also those who are vulnerable not to fall into the poverty below the poverty line. Yeah? So this is to prevent, the social safety net is to prevent them from becoming poor. So we used to just target the poor only, but targeting the poor would mean that you do means tested, and it would also mean that it's inefficient. Worldwide evidence shows that 11% will go to the administration, and the exclusion error and the inclusion error is about 30% if you go by means tested. So we propose that we should be more developmental in our approach to social protection, because it is also about human capital development. So it's not just about providing the welfare. If I can quickly suggest that we use the life cycle approach, and this approach is the global best practice, but especially advocated by the ILO, where we target the vulnerable, the underlying vulnerabilities, rather than targeting the groups. So we go at the different stages of their life when they are most, most vulnerable, yeah, when they are young, or when they are sick or unemployed, or when they are old. So by targeting, and hopefully we will share with you, if you want to use the Belanjawanku as the figures to show that perhaps we can raise them to that level that at least they reach the minimum standard of living. So the proposal is that we relook at, redesign our social protection system to reflect on how moving forward, when the country is becoming, or the population is aging, that we are well prepared. This is what we mean by preparing for an aging population, where you are creating a multi-layer income for those who are old, or for the older Malaysians. And also through this framework, because I will share with you the slides, that the advantage of this framework is that it promotes social solidarity, it promotes inclusivity, and also cross-subsidization. Yeah? Because for those who are in the working ages, they should contribute to the social protection or to the social insurance. So that would support, yeah, that would, like the haves, would support the have-nots, the young would support the old, the working would support the non-working. Yeah?
Prof,
so towards
is it possible to wrap up? Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can wrap up with this slide, to show that at least we should offer the basic social protection floor, which would include, although we do have the universal health care, but for the floor, the other element of social protection is social old age pension or social pension. And what we are proposing is not just social pension, but also a universal child grant, so that it will contribute towards the human capital development that that's very much needed. And to do that, we suggest not to go and test or use proxies, but to use other means that's more efficient, and especially when a country like Malaysia, we have the My Card and My Kit, in order for us to ensure that every Malaysian is included in this national social protection framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much. All right, now we move on to our next speaker, and I think both of you will be presenting. Prof. Norma will also, do you want to start first? So I would like to invite Prof. Norma and Nick to share your views on Belanjawanku, reference budget for Malaysian 2022-2023. So I think we'll start just with Prof. Norma first, followed by Nick. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Madeline, and thank you, everyone. Now let me talk about my center and why we are doing this. The Social Wellbeing Research Center is an EPF endowed center. Yeah, so we are placed at the University of Malaya to advance research on social security, on aging, and also labor studies. Yeah, so in 2018 we work on what we call the reference budget for Malaysia. because of the high indebtedness among Malaysians, especially then, we saw that the indebtedness was about 90% of the Malaysian households were indebted, and some other very alarming figures that were shared by the AKPK, which is an agency of the central bank. So the EPF and SWRC decided to construct this reference budget, which is actually a budget as a guide, as a guide for Malaysians to plan for their expenditure, and especially an expenditure that is necessary, for their well-being. It is based on actual spending. We are aware that there is the Bank Negara would also publish the data for how much things cost, and also DOSM also has the data about what the EPF and also SWRC wanted to do was for individuals, the different groups in the society, on what they need in order for them to live comfortably, and for them to have that fiscal freedom, the fiscal margin, in order to have a better well-being. So Belanjawanku is a guide that provides a minimum monthly expenses on various types of goods and services for Malaysians in order to attain a reasonable and acceptable standard of living. So what we did was to get a focus group before we started to define what is a reasonable and accepted standard of living. We had among experts, and some representatives from various sectors to come and talk and debate what do we consider as a reasonable standard of living. And our definition, or the definition that this group came up with, was having adequate financial resources to afford not just the minimum basics, but also the ability to participate in a society for a decent and dignified living. So we are aware that there is a PLI for us to use as a measure whether Malaysians are comfortable or whether they are poor or not, but we feel that we have to go higher or above even to talk about the what you call that, the relative poverty. But in our case, our idea or the objective was to guide Malaysians to live within their means. So the issues then was about low savings, is about over-indebtedness, I mentioned earlier, and the high level of bankruptcy among youth. And this stems from low financial literacy rate among Malaysians. I think the OECD and the AKPK has done the work that shows that about 70%, close to 70% of Malaysians have very low financial literacy. And also the rising cost of living and poverty among Malaysians, low quality of life, and also social issues. Breakdowns in marriages and many other issues are also caused by poor financial literacy. So these are the reasons why we decided that a more detailed, and hopefully every Malaysians, but especially for the low income. So because the critics, the comments that we had when we launched this in 2019 was that it was too low, but the objective or the motivation for our reference budget is to support especially the low income for them to manage their finances wisely. So what we did was, first we investigated the spending behavior among Malaysians, and then we analyzed the expenses that's required. The spending behavior would go by the categories similar to what DOSM does for food, for transport, and also 5 other categories. Ainon will elaborate on that later. We analyzed the expenses required for those items or those categories, and then we develop a suitable personal budget that would suit an individual, a single individual, an individual without a car or just using the public transport. Because in other countries, especially the country that we model our reference budget is the Netherlands, and in Netherlands everyone uses public transport. And also then we come up with the guide for the informed decision that has to be that can be adopted or practiced by Malaysians. So at the national level, what reference budget can do is it can be another measure of poverty. Yeah, it can be another guide when one wants to move or wants to relocate for another job, for instance, from Kota Baru to Kuala Lumpur, then you know that in Kuala Lumpur you will need so much. So if you earn 1,200, which is minimum wage in Kota Baru, if someone offers you 2,000, can you live in Kuala Lumpur? Yeah. So it is a design. It also can be used for the design of social policy, that how you will support children, because in our Belanjawanku, we also have how much do you need for a child who is young, yeah, babies, and also for those who are in school and also in tertiary education, and the purchasing power calculation that can be used as well. It's also for EPF for their retirement advisory services. It's also for comfortable savings if you want to save. It's also for individuals to manage their finances and their debt. And for financial institutions, like for some countries, they even use it for credit scoring. Since time is limited, I pass the next slides to Ainun, please. It's on the data and method. Yeah, Ainun.
Thank you, Professor Dato Norma. I will talk about the data and method on the development of Belanjawanku. So when we started, the way we collected the data was based on, first, the questionnaire survey, the focus group discussion, price survey, as well as from published documents, the official documents from Dawson, Bank Negara, and various ministries. And to construct Belanjawanku, what we went through was we had to find a basis for construction. That is, we have agreed that the accommodation for a single person will be based on room rental and not house. Yeah? And for families, couples and single parents and elderly, it will be a house rental or a monthly mortgage repayment, whichever is lower. And we also have to assume that couples will own one car and a motorcycle. And the average travel distance to work is 30-kilometer radius from the place of residence. So it is also assumed that people have access to public health care and education, and that people are generally healthy, and they are able to make informed decisions. Okay, so these are the stages that it has gone through, yeah, stages. The stages of construction started with the orientation group. Prof. Norma has already explained just now, the focus group discussion. The idea was to get a consensus among the participants and the discussants, as well as the household representative, and also to check and review and to be agreed. Yeah? The important part of the whole thing is the consensus. And from there on, we proceeded to list the household categories, which comprise of single public transport user, single car owner, married couples without children, married with one child, married with two children, single parent with one child, single parent with two children, senior couple, and senior single. The characteristics of the household is that single persons and married couples and single parents are 18 to 40 years old, male and female, working and living in the respective cities. The younger child is a newborn to 6 years old, and the older child is 7 to 13 years old, male and female as well. And senior single and couples are 60 years old, male and female. So these are the items that we take into consideration for calculation of the cost for expenditure in Belanjawanku. We have the food, housing, utilities, transport, personal care, healthcare, childcare, and ad hoc or one-off expenses that occurs not on regular basis, can occur once a year or on quarterly basis. Yeah? And also social participation, discretionary expenses, as well as savings. Yeah? So this has gone through these phases of study from 2017 until recently. Prof. Norma has already explained. Yeah? And this is the summary that we have. Okay. As you can see here, by cities and household categories, yeah, we have Klang Valley for a single person, yeah, who is a public transport user will need at least 1930 a month. And a single car owner, single person who is a car owner will need about 2,600 a month. Yeah? And married without children is 4,630. With one child, it goes on, yeah? It increases 5,980, mainly because of childcare. Yeah? And of course, the second child is even more expensive. And as you can see there, for senior couples, when they retire, they need to have at least 3,210 a month to live in Klang Valley. So the other cities, the cheapest one is Alostar, yeah, and it goes down, yeah. Alostar and other cities, which we will show next. Okay, but before we go and see the ranking, this is what Klang Valley is like at a glance, yeah. So single person, yeah, and how much it costs, all right. And this is how much it costs for a person from single to get married and to have children and until they are old, yeah. How much it will cost. If you can see there, for a single person who uses public transport, when they buy a car, they need to have 35% more money in order to maintain the lifestyle. And for a single person car owner to get married, they need 78% more expenses, yeah, in order to be married and without children. So a child will increase the expenses by 29%, a second child by 15%, and so on. So similarly, for single parent, the increase from one child to another is about 19%. And this is the difference between cities as compared to Klang Valley. So we have here Klang Valley is the most expensive, and Georgetown is second most expensive. Johor Bahru, yeah, Melaka, Seremban, Kota Kinabalu, Kuantan, Ipoh, Kuching, Kuala Terengganu, Kota Baru, and Alostar. The difference is mainly because of food, housing, and transport. So as a conclusion, yeah, there are 4 main contributors to the belanjawanku basket, namely food, housing, transport, and utilities cost. Yeah? And belanjawanku also can show a person what happens when he moves from one category to another along his life cycle. It also helps a person to make, yeah, informed decision before making a huge financial decision. That means before buying a car or before buying a house or even before getting married, that is how much it's going to cost them. And also it helps individuals to prudently manage their finances. And EPF and our center will continue to update the figures regularly or whenever there are major events happening. Yeah. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really keeping to the time. Thank you. Now I call upon our planner, Dr. Alias Rameli, to share your thoughts on 4th National Physical Plan for a prosperous, resilient, and livable Malaysia. The floor is yours. 15 minutes, eh, Doctor? Yep.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera and selamat tengah hari. Okay, today I will explain briefly on the topic on the for National Physical Plan, one of the planning agenda towards prosperous, resilient, and livable Malaysia. So, as an introduction, the fundamental idea for us, Plan Malaysia, to prepare the National Physical Plan is to translate the socio-economic development planning agenda and policy through the 5-year Malaysia Plan into the spatial or land use or physical dimensions. So this is similar to the context of the current NPP4 that aim to translate the 12th Malaysia Plan, and the NPP4 is to complement and hope to become a guidance for all ministries, agencies, including by state and local authorities, especially in the context of Peninsular Malaysia. So if there are 3 things in 12th Malaysia Plan, from economy, security and well-being, and also in terms of the sustainability. So this is our rule, to translate it in the context of mapping it, land use it, into the land use planning through the National Physical Plan. And also, for instance, our trust is focused on a prosperous, resilient, and livable nation, to focus on balanced and dynamic growth, and also to focus on the livable environment and also inclusive community. And similar to 5-year Malaysia Plan, we will review it every 5 years. So in line with the preparation of National 5-year Malaysia Plan. So good thing about the National Physical Plan, as the level number 1 in terms of the land use plan. If we can see into this slide from 5-year Malaysia Plan, we have the National Physical Plan. We also have the sectoral plan to complement whatever agenda that must be addressed specifically in the National Physical Plan. And we also the level 2. From the National Physical Plan, we will translate it into the second level, that is regional and state planning. State plan, we have a regional plan, we have such a plan, and also we have the socio-sectoral policies plan at the state and regional level. And the third tier is local planning. We have local plan, we have the special area plan. And all these 3 levels was governed by the Town Planning Act. So you find other policy that really have a backup by the law. And the 4th one, implementation, is duty of local authority to make sure that what have been planned in National Physical Plan, in the regional and state plan, and the local plan must be followed by the, either by the developers or by the applicants. And a little bit background of the National Physical Plan. So prepared under the Act 172. Its functions, as mentioned earlier, is to act as a spatial framework for physical planning at the national, regional, state, and local level. Number 2, as a driver for the implementation of balanced development planning between regions, inter and intra, and also between urban and rural areas. So the focus of inclusive development becomes one of the agenda of the National Physical Plan. And in terms of economic, to drive towards enhancing the country's competitiveness in line with the requirement of 5-year Malaysia Plan. And number 4, to translate the country's key commitments at the global international level, such as SDG, New Urban Agenda, ESF, by World Bank, ESG, that currently exercised by the Bursa Malaysia. And number 5, to provide the basis for coordination between the federal, state government in strengthening sectoral policies at the direction of the state development. So we have started the currently number 4, started since 2006, number 1, 2, and 3 of the National Physical Plans. So among the focus, based on the content of the 12th Malaysia Plan, we have tried to put it in the physical dimension. For instance, let's say the chapter 4 in the 12th Malaysia Plan that focus on the national enhancing defense, security, well-being and unity. We put it in our policy that we strengthen national security planning, and the middle one on the advancing green growth development, and we also put it into the context of spatial planning, and in terms of the digitalization also we put in the perspective of the physical, and the rest I think on the national food security, we also prepare a special plan to map all existing food source area in the context of Malaysia, plus the Wilayah Labuan, where the location for the potential food sources in the future. Also on the livable environment, inclusive, and also smart growth development that align with the socio-economic plan that is stated in the 12th Malaysia Plan. So very brief on the strategic concept to shape the development landscape. So the NPP4 strategic concept adopts the concept of comprehensive spatial ecosystem, we call it as CSES, with emphasis on achieving optimal land use, economic development in key growth areas, enhancing inter-regional connectivity through integrated networks, and preserving and conserving ecological and agriculture assets. So connectivity, which is achieved through physical linkages and network, is the most important component in shaping the development of the area. So to enhance connectivity between areas in Peninsular Malaysia, excluding Sabah and Sarawak, so 5 linkages were proposed. Number 1, on highly strategic developed linkage in red line, okay, you can see it on the screen. Number 2, on highly strategic developing linkage in blue line. Number 3, strategic east-west linkage in pink lines. And number 4, potential linkages in green lines, and also local connectors in black line, which are existing local connectivity networks. So this is the sum of the targets in terms of the address outlined in the NPP. So very brief, let's say for 2025, we have set the urbanization rate is around 79.7%. The assessment for sustainability, although was put in the transmission plan to reach 120 cities by 2025, but because of our assessment based on the local authorities, we will target 90 of the local authorities. Sometimes one authority, they have 2 or 3 cities, okay? And forest coverage, 48%, and there are the rest of the figures. So in terms of the structure, so the aim, prosperous, resilient, and livable nation, there are 3 development thrusts from balanced and dynamic growth, spatial sustainability and climate change, and also the third one on livable environment and inclusive community. There are 11 strategic directions, which is in line with the direction by the 12th Malaysia Plan, and also 39 strategies, and also 120 action. So among the strategies, number 1, very brief, to strengthen the function of growth areas. Okay, so major economic activities are concentrated in key growth areas, which include the conurbation. We have conurbation. We have promoted development zones and catalyst center, and also at the agropolitan centers. For instance, Melaka, they are not situated in any conurbation, so it's contained by Melaka. So that's why we put Melaka to put it as the catalyst center or in the promoted development zone. So there are other cities also facing the same situation with Melaka and other states. Okay, number 2, so connecting regions through comprehensive infrastructure, transportation, and network planning. So NPP has once again addressed that there is a need for high-speed rail, in whatever name you want to call, HSR or other name, from southern to central to northern part. No choice. This will increase the mobility of people and the cargo in the future. So at the same time, we need to focus on to enhance the modal split, the use of public transport. Okay, the third one, the third strategy on improving digital and smart infrastructure. So we have try to promote in the context of Malaysia on smart city agenda. So we have 7 pillars from smart government, smart mobility, smart people, smart government, smart environment, and so on. And we have translated it in the context of blueprint by each state. Action plan will be 155 localities in Malaysia. And also we have accreditation, we have a standard for smart city, and also we will make sure that the awareness for the localities to implement the agenda of smart city. And number 4, ensuring holistic land use planning. This is our job, okay? So we have formulated the big data for development planning in the context of Malaysia by introducing the Malaysia Urban Observatory, so it will be easier in the future if agencies need the data, want to make this analysis or analytical analysis, just use the big data or MUO. Okay, number 5, implementing mitigation effort to reduce the risk of natural disasters and climate change. I think I already discussed it earlier. And number 6, on preserving and conserving the ecological assets. So we have put the target, 50% of forest coverage target for Peninsula Malaysia in 2040. Currently only 47.3% area in Peninsula Malaysia covered by the forest. And but if we mix with Sabah and Sarawak, I think we currently achieve by a figure of 55%. Okay, number 7, about the preserving area for national food security, I explained we have prepared a special plan, master plan, in map. So it will be easier to the Yang Berhormat Muhammad Sabu. I will brief personally to Yang Muhammad Sabu by one future weeks, okay, on this to preserve on our food security. And this is very important that cover the element of food agriculture, the peternakan, and also the perikanan or fishing. And number 8, so we have 2 minutes, development towards a carbon neutral nation. So this is the agenda of, before this by CASA, and we will support the CASA in terms of to reach the zero net carbon by 2050, okay? But although before we put the target of 2020 by 40% reduction, 2030 by reduction of the 45%, and we have prepared a special guideline to be referred by the 155 local authorities in Malaysia on how to reduce the carbon through the guidelines for low carbon cities strategies in the context of the local authority. Okay? Although the problem sometimes comes to the KPKT and Ministry of Housing and Local Government and also Plan Malaysia, all budget go to CASA. I think you need to think that some budget need to go to Plan Malaysia in particular. Okay, strategy number 9, number 9, sorry. To mainstream a clean, healthy, and safe lifestyle in planning and development. So a conducive living environment is one of the factors to achieve the livability or well-being of people. So the need of all sections of society are taken into account by ensuring the public facilities are provided at easily accessible location and incorporating the standard for universal design principle and integrated development methods. So the second last slides, the follow-through action for NPP by Plan Malaysia. Okay, so NPP aim to be referred by 11 states and also by at least 69 agencies in Malaysia. So we will prepare one of the follow-through exercise, a simple action by us. We will prepare the pull-out from each section of the NPP and will pass to the at least 69 agencies in Malaysia to help you. Next year, you want to apply for running plan for APU, will be easy. So it will help APU and also will help the agencies. Okay, that's yeah? So we will also conduct the teaching sessions. You can also apply with us whatever map you want from Plan Malaysia. So, and as a conclusion, so this is what I have spoke to Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim 6 hours after his swearing as a Prime Minister by 11 p.m. So to reform the planning development exercise based on the outcome-based development planning. So we have 12 Malaysia Plan, we have NPP. 12 Malaysia Plan also have a target motto to achieve prosperous, inclusive and sustainable development. Our NPP also focus on to achieve the prosperous, resilient and livable nation. At the end, to achieve the livable prosperity, well-being of the people of the country, stability. I think we have no choice for all agencies to follow what has been planned in the National Physical Plan, in the Structure Plan, in the local plan. So I really hope that in the future, for EPU not to approve of budget if the application not in line with the National Physical Plan, local plan, and Structure Plan. So this is the governance tata kelola yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri sebutkan, and NPP will key drivers to help EPU outlook to achieve the prosperous, inclusive and sustainable Malaysia in short and in the future. And this is to reform, islah pembaharuan. So outcome-based once again should become the agenda of Malaysia, especially during the mid-term review of 12 Malaysia Plan. Mr. Moderator, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Alias. You really make a good lecturer if you are in the university. I don't think I will sleep. Okay, so we have listened to all the four presenters, a very good introduction by Matthew, and followed by Prof. Norma, and followed by Nick. And we had a very good conclusion just now. So EPU just cannot avoid listening to the fact that he even warned EPU not to. I like that. So I think that is the way to go forward. And the word reform there. In the past, reform is always something that we are a bit allergic in Malaysia. Reformasi. Yeah. Okay, change the mindset. Okay, now I think we have, actually we should stop by one, but allow me to give about a few more minutes for a question and answers. I'm sure many of you here would like to ask questions, but can we just open the floor for discussion for about, it says here 10 minutes, but I know, there are some of you here who may want to go for your lunch now. Okay, can we start? I see there is a, yeah. Can you please introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Rameli Nordin from Research Management Unit here in EPU.
Yeah.
I just have two questions.
All
the
right.
first one to any of the panelists. When we talk about well-being and inclusivity, most of the time, the way we do our policy is very centralized.
Okay.
It's done in Putrajaya, and then it will affect people in Sabah, Sarawak, Kelantan, and whatnot. So is that the way we should move forward, or should we decentralize? That's the first question.
Okay.
The second question to TPR from the Plan Malaysia. You mentioned about 85% of urbanization rate. I'm just wondering how do we do that? How do we limit our urban growth? Because the way we see it currently, our cities are dispersed. It's not centralized in KL anymore. We are going all over the place. If you were to travel from KL to Malacca, you can see all the forests in Nilai or whatnot has been urbanized. So how do you control that? Thank you.
Okay. Meg, do you want to answer the decentralization?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. All right, so we have one question. Can I just have another question, please? Okay, since there's no question, can I just invite Prof. Norma to answer the first question? Should we decentralize? And maybe you can, if you want to add on later, and later followed by...
can add as well. I think we have a session this afternoon on governance, and as pointed by many people, that I think we have to also look at governance for Malaysia as well. Central planning can happen, yeah. But the implementation, the execution, and also the input into planning has to come from the local level. And I think we seriously have to think about this in the context of governance, that how local government is very important when we want to move forward. Yeah? So for us to achieve a developed country or more a high-income country, I think it cannot be business as usual. The way we manage, administer too has to change. That's my short input.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Do you have any take on that?
Thank you. So very quickly, I mean, I think it's a balance, right? So there is implementation that does have to be done at the local level, but you want to have a certain consistency or a minimum quality standards which can often be set and supported at a central level. So there is going to be a balance between a degree of planning that's done centrally and a degree of implementation that's been done locally. I think another good example is fiscal policy, to come back to a favourite theme of this morning's, which is some functions on the fiscal policy, particularly on the taxation side, are going to be done centrally. So maybe not property taxes, that might be more of a local thing, but things like income taxes and that are going to be a central function, so you can raise the revenues. But the spending, again, and the implementation, local governments do have a better feel for what the conditions are on the ground, how you might tailor policies to best address the issues in the ground, and that will be implemented at the local level. So there'll always be a balance, I think, between central and decentralized.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. What about?
Okay, short.
Yeah.
Our problem now on how to bring back people to the city. KL, their population is more than 5 million. Night population is only 1.9, number one. Due to the urban sprawl and development go to Nilai, to Kajang, okay. And the urbanization rate in 2020 is 77.2, expected to reach 79.7 in 2025, and will be expected up to 2030, 80%, and will be capped by not exceeding 80%, 85% by 2040. So the mechanism is very simple. We have planned the urban boundary, the rural boundary, in the national physical plan, in the state structure plan, in the local plan, and also the special air plan. So the answer is everyone has to follow. If we follow, we can control this plan. This urbanization rate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very centralized. Okay, thank you. I like that. Okay, we have, before we proceed to the Slido, the question, is there anyone here who wants to ask any question before I move? Yeah, we have one there. Please introduce yourself and who do you address your question to? Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Mac. My name is Madeline Mokhtar from UNSDSN. 2 questions. One to our great planner, Dr. Alias. You see, Malaysia promised 50% forest cover, but some international organization and many would argue this 50% would include permanent forest reserve or also plantations. And there's always argument between federal targets and state targets. Maybe some states would like to go lower. And what about the issue of EFT, ecological fiscal transfer? To the team from University Malaya, Nikno and Prof. Dato Norma, I got some questions from my naughty friends. On your pictograms, you only have people with 1 wife. A few would say, Madeline, tolong tanya, what if they have 2 or 3 wives? How would you advise as a guideline? Thank you.
Thank you, Maslin. Very, very tough question. First, the forest coverage, and now you're asking about what? We have maximum 4 wives, right? All right. So, can I just invite Prof? Yeah, Doctor. Yeah.
Okay. Palm oil estate definitely exclude in the calculation of 50% of the forest coverage. The accrual is between the Department of Forestry Department and also urban planning. The forestry focus on the permanent forest cover, but in plan measure context, we include some of the forests, let's say urban forest. So there are other elements that we consider as part of the forest because it's bog green, but excluding the palm oil, rubber trees, and on. So in the situation of the context of the other 50%, so based on the our data, So now in Peninsular Malaysia, it already achieved 47.3%, but there are many initiatives to reach 50% for Peninsular Malaysia, and probably to add of the existing 55% of the for Malaysia figures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Prof, if you can, we have 3 questions here, plus Prof. Mazlin's question.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Madeline. Yeah, we cannot cover all categories, as you know. Because for instance, when we learn from the Netherlands, they only have 1 adult and 2nd adult and then 1 child. So you just keep adding. Yeah, you keep adding. So in our case, when we have the wife, it's about 70% higher. Either you can plus another 78%, but there's certain economies of scale already for the 78%. So Prof. Madeline and your team, yeah, if you're planning to do that, you remember my graph? You know, first you go up, you maybe one wife, you go up, but if you marry the 2nd wife, then you'll come down again. And perhaps you will go below the dotted lines, the red dotted line. So you have to plan hard. So that's the use of the reference budget. Now, all these 3 questions are addressed to me because I think we have been talking, and I think a few of our partners, including the Central Bank, the EPF, and also KRI and the World Bank as well, about social protection. And the first question is very specific, yeah, on the social health insurance. And I'm also in the Council of Advisors for the health white paper. We're not supposed to say very much on health insurance just in case it becomes political. But I certainly believe that because we are coming from the social protection angle, we believe that health should be universal. Health should be publicly financed, but we know the cost of a good public finance health care. Yeah. So for those who can afford, they can have an option. Yeah. So it depends, but if you want to put everyone on social health insurance, just like our neighboring country, there are still people who will fall through the cracks. There will be people who fall through the cracks. So I'm not going totally for that, but for those who can, they should contribute, and especially to cover aged care, I think that is something that we can look into. Yeah. The second question on the aging population, why can't we participate in the economy? And I think if we, that was just a snapshot of what we are talking about, recommending to the government, but we also have a framework for aging in Malaysia. We definitely encourage productive and healthy and happy aging. Yeah? In fact, we are currently developing an active aging index which was developed by the EU, but we are doing it for Malaysia. Yeah? So we would encourage, or rather we would propose that the government should come up with more incentives. There is already an incentive that there will be a reduction in EPF if you hire someone post-60, and a few others, yeah, post-COVID, but that doesn't gain much traction, so we encourage more. But also on the demand side, i.e. the employers. Employers have to do something too about how do you encourage, because it is a pity that the baby boomers like us, you know, the government and individual households invested a lot in our education. So if we are not utilized, you know, the experience and the knowledge and the skills that we have, is a pity for the nation. So that's my answer to that. And the third one, how do we address the issue of poor people who want to stay in poverty? Oh dear. Is there such a thing? Because I believe that everyone have what you call dignity. Yeah. So I don't think, because this is not the case of Malaysia. You know, there are evidence elsewhere that people want to live, people want to have their dignity. So especially when we are suggesting social pension, for instance, is to give dignity to older person, so that at least he or she has an income. And studies in Malaysia, done by one of my colleagues, shows that a person who has an income, or older person who has an income, is less likely to be abused by their family members who care for them. Yeah. So when you have some income, although not much, maybe you can just give you know, some pocket money, or when your grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren visit you, there's certain dignity about that. So there's preconceived ideas that people want to stay in poverty because, and you know why that happens? Maybe the World Bank could also respond to this. But the reason why this happened, perhaps because we target poverty people. We don't target vulnerabilities. Hence, we have to shift away from targeting the poor, because the poor are volatile. This group is so elusive now. Yeah, you can have a job, but once you don't have a job for a few months, you are poor again. So, but targeting the vulnerabilities is the way to go. So the evidence are out there to show that if you target the group, that's when it becomes elusive. Do you want to go, Matt?
Yeah, just to close on that. So, I mean, I do agree that we should be supporting both the poor and the vulnerable. The vulnerable are people who can fall into poverty very easily and do need support. I do think there's an element of targeting that goes there, and we go beyond poverty, but it is important that we use scarce resources, you know, the best way we can. I think the concern is those benefit levels are so high that you go, well, I don't need to work anymore. And, you know, people do talk about this in the West. There's almost no developing country I know that is providing social assistance benefits that people go, I don't need to work anymore. And that's certainly not the case in Malaysia. In fact, you know, we looked at some research, we did some research in Indonesia. The social assistance benefits actually enabled you to work more. You know, they weren't so much you stopped working, but they were enough that you could, you know, afford childcare to then go and work, or you could afford transportation to go and look at a job that's further away. So actually, social assistance can help you contribute more and work more rather than work less.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Although we have one more question, but I think we have reached, I think we have more than past 5 minutes beyond the hour. Can you join me, or I would like to welcome all of you to join me to thank our presenters today. We have a very, very good discussion, and if there is anything else that you need